Happy Friday. Welcome to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. I'm Craig Mish, getting you ready for a big weekend in the NBA, the NHL, and, of course, Major League Baseball as well. Got the Preakness Stakes and the PGA Championship. Should be a fun weekend as we're closing in on the middle and then the end of May. So let's get started. Our guests on the show today talking some NBA will be Carlin Gay. Could we be headed for Game 7s? We'll find out. Sam McQuillan joins us courtesy of Legal Sports Report. And then USA Today's Jacob Kamaker weighs in on the upcoming NFL season. And by the way, in case you missed it yesterday, it's probably a good place to start. The schedule came out yesterday. It is the annual watch as many videos on social media as you can day, with teams putting out the schedules for the season. And of course, all of the schedules coming out yesterday: Thursday night football, Sunday night football. Here's Thursday. We'll start there. As you can see, week 2, Detroit Buffalo. That's a really good matchup. Of course, the highlights of Amazon Prime's games are Black Friday, Denver, Pittsburgh, week 12, Christmas Eve, Houston, Philly. And then on New Year's Eve, that's right, New Year's Eve, Baltimore will play Cincinnati. As far as Sunday night football is concerned, I think you kind of have to wonder if NBC thinks that Patrick Mahomes is going to be back in time to play Sunday night, because second game of the season, KC plays. In fact, the Chiefs have several games on Sunday night, which also include the 7th game of the season, KC against Seattle. Mexico City highlights Minnesota, San Francisco, week 11, and then naturally they'll flex out week 18 as they always do. And as I said, if Sunday night football, they're thinking Mahomes comes back, well, I guess he'll be back the first week of the season too, because Denver highlights their first game against the Chiefs. As you can see, the Giants get the second game of the year against the Rams. Patriots are back, of course, on Monday Night Football toward the end of the year. Certainly their coach involved in no stranger to any controversy in the offseason. And actually, the most important takeaway from Monday Night Football, as you can see, there are just one game each and every Monday night, not two. With the NBA taking a break yesterday, we move forward toward Major League Baseball last night. The Cubs finally got themselves a win against the Braves, 2-0 yesterday. Ben Brown ended up pitching 4 innings and 7 strikeouts. They were road dogs and avoid the sweep. Craig Counsell, after the game, said that it was pitching that keyed in the win.
Yeah, I mean, I think we just pitched really well tonight. And, you can pick up, everybody pitched really well tonight. So Ben started it off, and another really encouraging outing and important outing from what Ben's done is both of his 2 starts. Really, something that I feel like we could build on, and has given him a lot of confidence for sure. And then, the 2, when Hobie gets 2 innings there, the game's kind of in order, and we got a shot to kind of do it the way we want to do it, and the guys did a great job.
Meanwhile, the Dodgers were minus 160 yesterday. That's a small price for what you'll pay on LA all season. They ended up winning against the Giants yesterday. So they split the series. They played a 4-game set. Dodgers won 2, Giants won 2. Emmett Sheehan, the better pitcher of the 2 between him and Landon Roop. Sheehan, 6 innings pitched, 2 earned runs, 6 strikeouts. Will Smith led off and hit his first ever lead-off home run. Jung-Ho Lee hit it inside the park home run for the Giants, but it was not enough. Offensively, seems like LA finding a little more footing. Here's Dave Roberts on putting up a 5 spot yesterday.
Getting there. I think that there's still more in there offensively, but I think we're getting there. But obviously the most important thing is to win baseball games, and to not be completely synced up and still find ways to win is good. So hopefully we can get a game from the Angels. They sort of had our number the last few years.
The New York Mets may finally be on the right track. They called up their young prospect, A.J. Ewing. He hit his first career home run yesterday. Nolan McLean won for them. Juan Soto even got a couple of hits. So the Mets end up sweeping the Tigers after winning 9-4 yesterday. Is this the start of something positive for the Mets this season? Here's manager Carlos Mendoza on that.
These games you were down early. I think it was 2-0 in the first 2 games, then 3-0. Today, what does that kind of tell you about your team and where they're at least mindset-wise and stuff?
It's good to see it, because you get down, and we've been through a lot, and it feels like when you were going through that stretch where every time we got down a couple of runs, kind of like the game was over. That was kind of like the feeling. Now, we're down 3 in the first inning, and you still feel good, and you could just have that sense in the dugout, And sure enough, we get a homer. But in general, the pitching is going to keep us in games. They've been doing that the whole year, and it's just good to see the guys fight back. They're resilient, and they're not going to give up. They're not going to put their head down, and they're going to keep going, and that's who we are.
The red-hot bat of Kyle Schwarber delivered again yesterday. Phillies Red Sox. He hit his 18th home run in the game, and the Phillies win as road dogs. Jesus Luzardo, 6 innings pitched, no earned runs. Ranger Suarez faced his old team, did well, but did not get the win. Here is Schwarber after the game on facing his old buddy and homering off Suarez.
What was it like facing Ranger, and what made him so effective?
Yeah, I mean, he's a unique guy where he's got so many different weapons in the arsenal. And he has a really good idea of what he wants to do to you. Every single hitter. Obviously we know that the sinker changeup's a big pitch for him, but the cutter's underrated, the four seam, curveball. He plays a lot of different things off each and every single different pitch, and he's competitive with a lot of pitches. And I think that's why he's always going to be a guy that it doesn't matter how hard you throw, he's always going to find a way to get weak contact and outs.
Speaking of pitching, the Brewers seem to find it every year. They traded for Kyle Harrison in the offseason, and he struck out 7 over 5 shutout innings. The Brewers beat the Padres 7-1. Andrew Vaughn's also been a revelation for Milwaukee over the last year. Here is Pat Murphy on the Brewers starting pitching, which certainly has them in a good place in the Central.
Just for the whole homestand, too, with the starting pitching unit, what do you take away?
They've been great. It's the lifeblood of this whole organization for years. Like you got to pitch, and we've they've found guys for us that are young, and we put them through the car wash, and it's been great. It really has.
Car wash works in Milwaukee. All right, the White Sox are red hot. Who would have thought? Good season for them, by the way. They beat the Royals again, and they've won 5 games in a row. They were home dogs. Randall Grichuk hit a home run yesterday, also drove in 4 RBIs. How about the White Sox? Meanwhile, the Reds beat the Nationals 15-1 yesterday. Home runs from J.J. Bleday, Dane Myers, and Matt McClain. Bleday actually hit 2 home runs yesterday. Wow, he's on fire. Here's Bleday after the game on his opportunity with the Reds.
It's just a breath of fresh air playing for this team and playing for this organization. Coming in spring training, I felt good. I felt like there was some opportunity here, and I got an option out of spring, but I still felt like I was in a good spot mentally, physically, and I just kept on rolling with what I was doing in spring and took advantage of playing every day down there in AAA and worked on my approach and continued to get better. There's always room for improvement, and was able to get the call and be up here, and it's just trying to just keep on carrying it through.
The Mariners take their series with the Astros 8-3 yesterday. Luke Raley, who's been really good for Seattle this season, 2 for 5 with a home run. Yordan Alvarez homered in the loss for Houston, who loses again. The Cardinals score 2 to beat the A's 5-4, so they win as road underdogs. It was Jordan Walker who went 2 for 5 with a home run. That was the key to their win. And the Pirates beat the Rockies 7-2. Ryan O'Hearn, who's been a nice signing for Pittsburgh, went 3 for 4 with a home run. All right, so the Montreal Canadiens are on the doorstep of the East Finals. They end up beating the Buffalo Sabres 6-3, and now they'll play Game 6 in Montreal on Saturday with a chance to wrap it up. 5 goals scored in the first period. Montreal fans haven't seen this kind of success from their squad in a long time. Golden Knights beat the Ducks to advance to the Western Conference Finals, and then the Stanley Cup, as I said, resumes on Saturday. We'll see if Montreal can wrap it up. All right, we'll wrap it up now and hit some NBA when we come back. Carlin Gay joins us from Sporting News right after this. And welcome back to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. Lots happening this weekend, including the PGA Championship. Scotty Scheffler, a huge favorite after a couple of nice days to win this thing this weekend. We will see what ends up happening, but make sure you stay locked in all weekend to updates on the PGA Championship. And then, of course, on Sunday for the grand finale. I'll be back with you on Sunday talking some baseball on Pro Baseball Today as well. All right, before we hop back into the National Basketball Association ahead of their big weekend, let's get to some Stanley Cup final results. We've got the playoffs going on right now, and the Canadiens beat the Sabres yesterday by a final of 6-3. They were slight road dogs and now lead the series 3-2. We know that both cities are desperate for championships, Montreal and Buffalo, but it is right now the Canadiens that lead 3-2. Game 6 will be in Montreal on Saturday night. In case you missed last night's game, 5 goals were scored in the first period. Now, Montreal is heading back home, the Canadiens with a chance to win, and here is Nick Suzuki on the opportunity to close it out.
This will be your first Saturday night in the playoffs at home. We've talked about the atmosphere there before, but you've got a chance to put these guys away. How important is that you take advantage of that, and how nuts do you think the city's going to be?
Yeah, I mean, the city's already pretty crazy, and we saw against Tampa, it takes a lot to close out a team, and we have another opportunity to do that, and I'm sure the crowd's going to be into it hours before the game starts, and it's going to be rocking. So we're ready for that. Excited for the opportunity to close it out.
All right, so we'll get back to hockey a little bit later in the show. Now let's pivot over to some NBA, and covering it, of course, for Sporting News is Carlin Gay ahead of this very big weekend in the association. Carlin, great to have you back here on NewsWire, and you talk about fans being excited in Montreal. Cleveland Cavaliers fans are going to be very excited too. 7:10 p.m. Eastern, the Cavs could close this series out. I did not see this coming like this, but here we are. Total of 210.5. Cleveland finally did the job, getting the win on the road in Detroit. Is this the end of the Pistons here tonight?
I think so. And I know when we spoke last week, it was all doom and gloom because it was 2-0. Cavs were down. They were going back home. I think we came off of a game where Evan Mobley had 1 rebound, and I was lamenting that. He's played much better, not to the level that I think he should be at, but he's played much better over the last 3 games. James Harden gave you the game that he would give you in a series where he kind of took over. I thought that was in Game 5. He played great. Now I think it's up to Donovan Mitchell. And I know if you just look at the stats for this second round, he's actually leading the league in scoring, 30 points per game. He's played well on paper. But those stats have been kind of quiet. There hasn't been like a Donovan Mitchell type game yet in this series. Going back home, an opportunity to close it out, where I believe it's a must-win situation for Cleveland. They don't want to go back to Detroit for a Game 7. I think Donovan Mitchell has to have that Donovan Mitchell-esque type game where he scores 40 points. He controls every aspect of this game for the Cleveland Cavaliers to be able to move on and for him to get to his first ever conference finals in his career. James Harden's been there before. James Harden's already known what that pressure is like. Donovan Mitchell has not, and this is his chance to do that. Close it out tonight in Cleveland.
Yeah, it could be the case, and odds makers are telling us Cleveland's going to win the series. They're minus 355 right now on FanDuel, so obviously not a lot of faith that Detroit can win one of the next 2. This is surprising. I mean, Detroit was the number 1 seed. They were playing like the best team in the NBA, but Boston learned fast, and maybe Detroit is about to learn as well. So the odds to win the Eastern Conference have the Knicks currently, Carlin, as the favorite because they've been playing the best basketball really of anyone, maybe even including Oklahoma City. So they're minus 240 to win the East. And odds makers tell us that Cleveland essentially wins. And then naturally, if Cleveland does win tonight or in the next game, we know that their odds will be plus 200, something like that. Knicks will go down a little bit more to minus 180. But at this point, is it the Knicks conference to lose based on the way that they've played?
Yeah, it is. And it really comes down to this. Like, they're going to have home court advantage in the series if it is Cleveland, and it should be. And, you have that rest factor, and that helps OG Anunoby, basically, because OG Anunoby did not play the last 2 games in the Sixers series. Up until that point, I thought he was playing the best basketball of any New York Knick, not named Jalen Brunson. So, you have OG Anunoby healthy, you get him back where he can guard a Donovan Mitchell or guard a James Harden and kind of take them out of the picture and just allow the other 4 players to focus on one guy. OG Anunoby is that good. And with the Knicks' length defensively, they're able to – Mikal Bridges, let's not forget, he's a pretty good defender. Josh Hart could also switch up and make some defensive plays. And protecting the rim, you do have Mitchell Robinson when he's healthy and ready to go. So that is a pretty good lineup. And they're shooting the cover off the ball right now. Maybe the rest kind of hurts them in terms of the jump shooting because they didn't miss against the Sixers. But I do believe that they found something offensively to kind of unlock things, and it's a completely different offense than what the Cavaliers are having to deal with the Pistons, who don't have that much offense. So I do favor the Knicks in this one, and they'll finally get back to the finals. It's like 1999 all over again.
if that is the case, let me ask you something that some people are saying is that we know that Knicks are not rooting for one team one way or the other, but I hear from some that it would be better for the Knicks if Cleveland won this series.
100%.
Right. Okay. Why is that?
100%. Less physical, less wear and tear on the body. Detroit's going to beat you up. They're going to take you in the back alley and force you to kind of play this sort of, UFC style of basketball that has gotten them to this point in their season. They don't want to have to go through that war of attrition. You kind of want to just play basketball, play freely. Cleveland is not as physical, and the Knicks could actually take care of that physicality. They did that against Atlanta. When they started to play a little bit more physical, that's when Atlanta kind of fell by the wayside. Remember, Atlanta was up 2-1 in that series. We forget about that because that feels like 3 weeks ago, and it is.
Right.
If they can do that against the Cleveland Cavaliers and kind of shut them down physically, saw if the Raptors were able to stick with them. We see what Detroit is able to do, pushing it to 6 games, and they were with a 2-0 lead. The Knicks should be able to do much of the same in terms of physicality, but they have much better offense than both of those teams and offensive players than both those teams. So that's what will take them through to the finals.
Makes sense. But if one NBA game isn't enough for you, we got another one tonight, and it could be another closeout. So when we come back, we'll break this game down. Spurs and Timberwolves, and they play tonight at 9:40 p.m. Eastern. Carlin will stick around. We'll break it down next. Stay on the grid. We'll be right back. Carlin Gay back with us, keeping busy with the NBA and the WNBA, by the way. He's got a lot to cover this weekend and moving forward here. So maybe it is better for you, Carlin, to get this NBA out of the way and just move on to the WNBA. But for most of us, though, I think we're hoping for a Game 7 selfishly. Odds makers are telling us no, that will not happen. So I want your opinion. Spurs, I mean, this is a big road favorite for a Game 6, -5.5. Total of 218.5. I guess it's just fair to say that if the Spurs are playing like they should, then there's simply no chance that the Timberwolves would have to win this game tonight. But I don't know. I question that. I think at the very least we get a close game. How about you?
Yeah, and I think the odds makers are looking at this saying, you know, we've seen what the Spurs can do defensively, and we probably just don't trust what the Minnesota Timberwolves can do offensively, and that will kind of carry us through. But when you look at the splits between home and away, the Spurs are a better defensive team when they're playing at home. Most people are, right? Like you're comfortable sleeping in your own bed, et cetera, et cetera. Plus, we have to remember one of those games is kind of a bit skewed because Victor Wembanyama took himself out of that contest. So the Timberwolves are able to score a little bit more. He's going to be playing in this game, and he's going to remember the last time he was on this floor, he made one of the biggest mistakes in his career in taking himself out of that game with the elbow that he threw. So I expect Victor Wembanyama to come in with some intensity, some kind of that killer instinct that he does have, and one of the reasons why he is one of the better players in the NBA today, not later on, like I'm talking right now. But on the other side, there's a killer on that side too, and his name is Anthony Edwards, and he hasn't gone down without a fight, you know, in many of his playoff series. So I expect Anthony Edwards to the knees bothering him, but he's going to feed off this energy off this crowd in Minnesota. Minnesota knows that this could potentially be the last time they see their home team play. I actually think that Minnesota Timberwolves, I'm going to take them to cover because that's a big number. I think they'll be able to keep it close, and I actually do believe that they're going to actually push through and force a Game 7 back in San Antonio. Whether or not they win the series, I think San Antonio will be too tough at home in a Game 7. But I can count on them for Game 6 because I do believe in Anthony Edwards. He's probably the most underrated star, Craig, in all of American sports right now. Like, Anthony Edwards is that good. He should be a bigger star than he is, even within the NBA circle. He should be. And that hasn't happened yet. But this will be one of his moments that I think we'll remember later on in his career.
Yeah, and the Spurs, as you can see, just very big favorites to advance. And certainly, I think, as Carlin even said, he thinks that's the case, but maybe Minnesota wins tonight. Odds to win the Western Conference overall, I mean, not much discussion here. Oklahoma City, as big as a favorite as you're ever going to see, maybe even going back to the Warriors days dominating the West, or the Lakers days, or even the Miami Heat. Like, this is just a huge Western Conference favorite here at -290. But let's move on to something else that I'll ask you, Carlin. Oklahoma City, as they wait to play in the Western Conference Finals, you can actually get them, if they go 4-0 in the Western Conference Finals, at +500, meaning they sweep. Wow. And if they have a 16-0 postseason, which I would find incredible, but I don't think so, you can get that at 20-1. So I ask you, Carlin, does it matter? Between San Antonio and Minnesota, do you think that either of those teams can win a game? We saw the Spurs have a lot of success against OKC during the regular season, but OKC has taken this to another level since the playoffs began. What do you think?
They have, and I think the Spurs are the one team that OKC will genuinely look and say we probably should treat them with a little bit of fear, and I do believe that the Spurs would make that a longer series. You know, OKC's been able to kind of get by in the first two rounds by playing lesser teams. They have had the confidence of like, hey, we won a championship, we know we're better than you guys, we're going to step on the floor and prove it. And I've been impressed by the way that they're going out and sweeping these teams. Like, they're not allowing a gentleman's sweep. They're just getting them out of there in 4 games. The problem right now for OKC isn't anything on the other side of the court. It's internally. Is Jalen Williams going to be healthy? He's been able to kind of rest the first 2 series and miss some games here and there. He cannot do that against the San Antonio Spurs because it's a Spurs team that's going to be coming in there with some confidence, a Spurs team that has some history with this OKC team saying, hey, we beat you a couple times in the regular season when you were trying to win games. So, don't give us like it's the regular season when we weren't trying. No. We were trying to win those games if you're OKC, and we still lost against the San Antonio Spurs. So there's some confidence there for the Spurs, and I think Victor Wembanyama is just an ultimate equalizer. Like, he is just a different player that we've never, ever seen. So, that's one guy that could take over a series. So the Thunder, I would say they're not going to sweep the Spurs by any means, and they definitely wouldn't sweep the Timberwolves. I think the Timberwolves will get a game.
Okay, fair enough. There you go. Carlin's been spot on. So hopefully he helps you out with these series as they wrap up, and we'll check back with you, Carlin, next week here on the show.
I appreciate you.
All right, and check Carlin out for all of his WNBA coverage as well. We'll be back with Sam McQuillan from Legal Sports Report next.
Over the summer where there's drastic changes and gas drops down to $3 a gallon, $2.50 a gallon in some states, and then you have some of the price markets go down. You ride that momentum is what Joe's talking about. So if you say right now, which party will win the U.S. House, and you think it's the Republicans currently trading at 20%, you take them now, and if good press comes, that turns into 25% and 30%, then you have the option to cash out.
Prediction Markets Edge, only on SportsGrid.
There is a pick tonight that Gabe has that, to some degree, I find completely outrageous. Then I looked at it a second longer, and it might be a really smart angle.
I like to test them a little bit.
I like that.
To test them a little bit.
I like that a lot.
Oh, you don't know? You don't know this team name? You should. You're in the sports business.
Game time decisions, only on SportsGrid.
Number one, who asked for this? Nobody, but nobody asked for a bump up in the number of teams in both the men and the women's basketball tournament from 68, including the 4 play-in teams, to 76. And by the way, it looks like it is a near-done deal. ESPN and ABC News reported this morning that's very close to being done. It could be announced by the end of this week.
NewsWire, only on SportsGrid.
Class is in session. Today, let's talk about the teaser. A teaser is a multi-leg bet where you shift the point spread in your favor. You get better numbers, but every selection has to win. It doesn't matter what you bet if you don't have the insights. Tune into SportsGrid and get ahead of the class.
All right, welcome back to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. Always fun to cash out, as you say, on a Friday with our friend Sam McQuillan from Legal Sports Report. You could read all of his columns, by the way, over at legalsportsreport.com. And we're getting some interesting numbers here from sportsbooks in terms of revenue in 2025. Sam, you know, the same story that we have been telling for a long period of time, not just prediction markets, but you know, the other part of this is that states like California and Texas and Minnesota and Georgia just aren't legalizing sports betting. It's a very quiet year in 25, and 26 seems to be no different. But the sports books themselves seem to be doing just fine. So I'd love that explanation, if you don't mind.
Yeah, good setup, Craig, with naming the number of states that have not legalized sports betting. It's getting easy to remember which ones those are because we have fewer and fewer of them, and it's really just the same ones, which we'll get into in a little bit. But the U.S. sports books in 2025 had a record nearly $17 billion in revenue. Like you mentioned, the number keeps going up. In fact, it went up about 23% from the year earlier. So revenue isn't exactly the profit that sports books are keeping. You know, they still have a lot of costs. They have to pay people, they have to pay taxes, but it's essentially the money that they keep after they pay out all of the bets. So that was up about, you know, like a quarter of what it was from the year before. But really interesting, I think, for the first time ever, the American Gaming Association, which reports all this stuff, they did not include handle in their report. For the first time ever, they do this annual report. And that comes as, you know, separate data that we track shows that handle has really been slowing. You know, handle is the total amount of money that people are betting. You know, like you mentioned, no new states going online. it's going to be hard to keep growing that number. People aren't going to always be betting more and more. We actually have some data that indicates handle grew about 11% during the year, so separate from what the AGA reported. But if you match that up with the revenue, it shows that the revenue is outpacing the handle growth, like about by double. So essentially, people are not betting more and more. It's more money they're losing, and that comes as obviously same game parlays, which you can never kind of undersell how much growth that continues to have and how much that continues to help sports books make more money out of their customers. Live betting has taken off more, which again is higher margin bets for the sports book as well. And then really importantly, I think the story here is also NFL season was really good for the sports books, which comes after last year. They had one of their worst NFL seasons ever on record. So that kind of gives us a little bit of a hint as to why perhaps they're making so much more revenue, and that growth is really outpacing the actual handle growth. But with handle in general, that's been a concern among the industry as of late. There's actually some data that indicates that betting is down for the first time ever, or was down in the first quarter of the year, about 2% from the year before, which is a big change because for years we've talked about double-digit growth every quarter. That's going to be something the industry really has to kind of get a hold of or take the reins of going forward throughout the rest of the year. You definitely don't want to have, betting going in the opposite direction once the World Cup comes around this summer. And then once football season comes around in the fall, that'll always sneak up on us like it does. The sports books, they'll want to make sure that it doesn't sneak up on them and that they'll obviously be growing their handle. So I'm really interested to see how that story kind of plays out as well. Meanwhile, taxes are up even more than revenue, as comes a lot of states have increased taxes as well. We've talked about Illinois with their huge tax increase. Now a number of other states as well. New York, I believe, is considering something. Maryland, New Jersey, all passed similar tax increases last year. So we'll see if those taxes keep going up as states keep passing more taxes, or like the industry likes to say, that perhaps that might, help the black market and drive activity offshore. But yeah, it's an interesting report to kind of dig your teeth into. I would definitely encourage everyone to take a look at legalsportsreport.com and check it out.
All right, check out, as Sam said, they do a great job covering sports betting and a lot of prediction market discussion as well. And as Sam said, it's a good segue to kind of discussing which state potentially could legalize sports betting. And Sam, for my money, it is the state that we're going to talk about next, because simply put, for the state of Georgia, that has a very rabid college fan base and young people who want to have the appetite to bet on sports, not to mention, Sam, how long can they get away with not having sports betting when their neighbors in Mississippi and Florida and the Carolinas and Tennessee all have sports betting? To me, Sam, I think Georgia will be the next state to legalize this. I don't know when it'll be, but I think that the next big one is the state of Georgia.
Yeah, and to make your prediction, to give it even more weight, Craig, you now have sports betting companies forming a super PAC where they've spent almost $10 million on Georgia elections this cycle already, exactly for the reason you're saying, to get sports betting legalized. It's been one of those states for a long time where, because of political footballing, because of religious interests, because of, quite frankly, how janky some of these new laws can be and the political process in general, Georgia has been unable to pass sports betting. And then to even throw another, kind of bone in that argument of why it might be now that it legalizes is because you have a lot of young people in the state that are betting on sports, not just offshore, but on prediction markets, which have definitely taken seas of a state like Georgia as a huge opportunity with a huge sports appetite, where now a lot of these, sports betting adjacent activities are going on to young people, to people without the same safeguards or, oversight of the industry that sports betting has. And I think sports books are really themselves concentrating a lot of the effort in Georgia. They've already raised $48 million this cycle. It's this new super PAC created, or just, I guess, PAC, you would call it, not a super PAC, called Win for America, which is DraftKings, FanDuel, Bet365, and Fanatics. And Georgia is one of the big states they're concentrating on, with multiple, races in the House and the Senate. They're actually the top independent contributor for the election cycle. And they're also concentrating on other states as well. In Nebraska, there's going to be a ballot initiative, which I believe they've already funded about $6 million towards. So we're talking about a lot of money being concentrated this election cycle to get sports betting passed in these states. I'm told Texas is going to be a big focus, as well as Alabama. So other states similar to Georgia, where there's a big appetite for sports betting, a lot of young people, a lot of colleges, a lot of college sports. And then these sports books are also going to be concentrating on states like New York, Ohio, Illinois, which have already passed sports betting, but have some really hefty taxes, a lot of things the industry would like to either get rid of or make sure that states do not do more of. I'm sure they would hate if the tax rate in New York went from 51% to 52, 53, 60, even higher. You never know how high lawmakers are willing to go on supposed sin taxes. So yeah, sportsbooks really concentrating a lot of money this election cycle. Georgia will be their big target, as well as those other states I mentioned.
All right, Sam, let's close it out with Colorado. They're trying to set a trend here, which I think a lot of states will follow, which is limiting the amount of deposits that you can make over a 24-hour period to a sports book. Nothing to say necessarily on limits, but deposits really seemingly, at least to the state and legislature, indicate the idea that somebody is losing money betting on sports and maybe going above their means. Do you think that this is something that passes?
Yeah, it's now sitting on the governor's desk, so it's just a pen stroke away of being put into law, and I believe would go into effect this summer if that happens. All signs point to the governor being fine with this. It's not a measure that seems super controversial for politicians in the state, and it's part of a larger kind of theme, like you alluded to, Craig, that we've seen of states. Once they pass sports betting, they want to add new rules, and one of those new states that is putting a new rule in where you can't make more than a couple of deposits within 24 hours, again, designed to prevent people from spending more money than they would like, more money than they should, and just kind of tweak and put the industry in check a little bit more. There's also a provision in the bill that would make sure that all the revenue that goes towards their water plan in Colorado is the same every year, cannot be less than the year before, which is again designed to raise more tax revenue and get more out of the industry. Just, number one of those tweaks we're seeing from states as sports betting matures, and they want to kind of, keep tweaking it as best they can. But definitely a trend we'll probably see some other states try to follow.
And check out Sam and all of his work at LegalSportsReport.com. Sam, thanks again. We'll see you next week.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Craig.
Jacob Kamaker will be with us next.
Over the summer where there's drastic changes and gas drops down to $3 a gallon, $2.50 a gallon in some states, and then you have some of the price markets go down. You ride that momentum is what Joe's talking about. So if you say right now, which party will win the U.S. House, and you think it's the Republicans currently trading at 20%, you take them now, and if good press comes, that turns into 25% and 30%, then you have the option to cash out.
Prediction Markets Edge, only on SportsGrid.
There is a pick tonight that Gabe has that, to some degree, I find completely outrageous. Then I looked at it a second longer, and it might be a really smart angle.
I like to test them a little bit.
I like
to test them a little bit.
I like that a lot.
Oh, okay, you don't know? You don't know this team name? You should. You're in the sports business.
Game time decisions, only on SportsGrid.
Number one, who asked for this? Nobody, but nobody asked for a bump up in the number of teams in both the men and the women's basketball tournament from 68, including the 4 play-in teams, to 76. By the way, it looks like it is a near-done deal. ESPN and ABC News reported this morning that's very close to being done. It could be announced by the end of this week.
NewsWire, only on SportsGrid.
Class is in session. Today, let's talk about the teaser. A teaser is a multi-leg bet where you shift the point spread in your favor. You get better numbers, but every selection has to win. It doesn't matter what you bet if you don't have the insights. Tune into SportsGrid and get ahead of the class.
And welcome back to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. Hey, time to check in with Jacob Kamaker from USA Today. It's been a couple of weeks, maybe even a month since the NFL draft. Now it's time to take a look at the schedule and see if Jacob has any opinions, certainly on what he has seen transpire. Jacob, great to have you back here on NewsWire. I know we'll be talking a lot later in the summer, but schedules come out yesterday. Let's take a look at some of the teams that released them and see how they potentially affected the season win totals. And I know that you've submitted that you want to talk about some with us. So let's start with the Indianapolis Colts. Their win total is 7.5. Great start for the Colts last season and a horrendous finish. Odds makers are telling us this is not going to be a great year for them. We know that they're going to have quarterback issues at least to start the season. I don't know how they'll finish the season. What did you make of anything in terms of scheduling that came out this season? And do you think that this is a pivotal year for the Colts?
I do think it's a pivotal year for the Colts, Craig. I mean, Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard are facing a lot of pressure to deliver, but I'm just not sure it's going to happen for them. I mean, you've got Daniel Jones coming off the torn Achilles, and yeah, he might be ready for week one, but we've seen among all injuries in the NFL, a torn Achilles, especially for a quarterback, is one of the toughest to overcome. And do they have an easier schedule on paper than most teams? Yeah, I think they rank about 8th or 9th in strength of schedule. But that start to the season is pretty brutal. I think they have the Ravens, the Chiefs, the Texans out of the gate. The Commanders, if they're healthier, could be better this year. So I'm not sure if the Colts could, stumble out of the gate, maybe not win their first 3 games, and end up in a situation where, like, hey, they're suddenly behind the 8 ball. They've got a quarterback still trying to get into a rhythm. So I just don't like the situation for the Colts this year. I think it's a tough spot for them. So I'm going to be going under on their win total. I think they have some good personnel, but their weaknesses with the quarterback uncertainty and their lack of proven pass rush just scare me off enough to say that, hey, this could be a surprisingly bad season for a team that, we all thought was going to make the playoffs last year before Jones got hurt.
Yeah, definitely so. And hopefully for Jones, he ends up coming back, cashing in once again, maybe on a long-term contract. Okay, so the Lions, that was a real big surprise for me last season, just seeing them fall as fast as they did. I thought the Lions could have been a Super Bowl contender, but they definitely were not the case. They've tinkered a lot this offseason, very specifically with protection of Jared Goff, which they just could not do in those losses last year. Their win total, 10.5. Of course, their schedule comes out. They get a lot of primetime games and national games, Jacob, going into the 2026 season.
Yeah, Craig, I couldn't believe this when I looked at the Lions. They have the easiest measured strength of schedule for the upcoming season, despite playing in the NFC North. And that just makes it so that, last year, obviously a disappointing season, but it was a blessing in disguise for them to finish as the last place team in that division, because they drew 3 easier matchups with their non-rotating last place schedule there. So the Lions are going to have an upper hand on a lot of the non-divisional teams they play. The NFC North games are always going to be tough. They're always going to be back and forth. I feel like the teams almost always end up splitting those series is what it feels like. But you look at what the Lions have done to that offensive line, signing a solid center in Cade Mays, spending a first-round pick on an experienced right tackle, Blake Miller, to help Penei Sewell shift to the blind side. I think the blocking is going to be better. I think the offense is going to be operating better than it was last season with, that was their first year without Ben Johnson, and the John Morton pairing there didn't work out. They're going to give Drew Petzing a shot as their offensive coordinator. But I like what the Lions have done, and I think this schedule is going to allow them to get a lot of wins. So I'm expecting a bounce back year. I'm going to go over this win total. I think they're an 11 or 12 win team that should be in the hunt for that NFC North title once again.
Okay, let's move on to the Cincinnati Bengals here, Jacob. And boy, if the Bengals could ever get off to like a 3-1 start or a 4-1 start, you would think that they would be formidable. But unfortunately for them, it's been injuries. Joe Burrow again last year. But the odds makers are telling us that if Burrow is healthy, the Bengals are making the playoffs. Their win total is 9.5. Starting off a season, we have not seen this from odds makers in a really long time, with them being so bullish on Cincinnati. So what gives, Jacob, going into the year? Why is Cincinnati, why do they have such a high win total?
Yeah, so I think it's, again, a strength of schedule situation. I think the Bengals rank 3rd easiest in terms of schedules this year, behind only the Lions. And I believe the Saints rank number 2 overall right now, based on projected win totals for this upcoming season. And I think, to your point, the big question about the Bengals is, can they avoid stumbling out of the block? Because they've been notoriously slow starting under Zach Taylor. They tried to play their starters a little bit more in the preseason last year to kind of reverse that trend, but obviously we didn't see the full effect of that because Joe Burrow couldn't stay healthy. But when Burrow has been on the field, this team has been a consistent winner. So I think anybody who wants to bet the Bengals over is banking on Burrow staying healthy, and these big-time defensive acquisitions like Brian Cook at safety, Dexter Lawrence on the defensive line, Boye Mafe on the edge, like those guys should help improve what was a dreadful stop unit last season. So I like the Bengals. I think they can do better, but it's all going to depend on if Joe Burrow can stay healthy. I'll back that for now. That might be a fool's errand, Craig, but I think it's got to happen at some point, right?
You would think, but it just hasn't, and that's really the key here. But Burrow, when he's healthy, I mean, he's as good as any quarterback, honestly, in the NFL. He's that good. Speaking of quarterbacks, Arizona has none. So their win total is set now at 4.5 after their schedule has come out. Outside of Miami, most think that Arizona will be the worst team in the NFL. It could be one of those two, and their schedule isn't easy. And they really didn't do a lot this offseason to make me think that they're going to be much better than they were a year ago. Kyler Murray is, of course, gone. He wasn't even playing at the end. This whole Michael Wilson, Jacoby Brissett combination, that was great, but they weren't winning any games with that. So does anything change this year? And basically, I guess if I had to ask you, Jacob, Miami or Arizona being one of the worst teams in the NFL, who will it be?
I'm going to take the Cardinals as the worst team for the reasons you mentioned. They just don't have a quarterback. And do I like some of their offensive weapons? Sure. I like Jeremiah Love. I like Marvin Harrison Jr. I like Michael Wilson. I like Trey McBride. But if you don't have someone who can consistently get them the ball, they're not going to win a lot of games. And they're playing in the NFC West, one of the toughest divisions in football, with 3 legitimate Super Bowl contenders from last season who all won 12 games, and the Seahawks who won the actual Super Bowl. So I just don't see the Cardinals having much success at all. I think they're not fully tanking, but they're going to be hoping to get an early pick to get a quarterback in next year's draft.
And there are a lot next year. All right. Thanks again, Jacob. Have a good weekend. We'll catch up again before training camp begins in July. Thanks again.
Sounds good, Craig. Take care.
All right. Jacob Kamaker from USA Today. We'll be right back.
Over the summer where there's drastic changes and gas drops down to $3 a gallon, $2.50 a gallon in some states, and then you have some of the price markets go down. You ride that momentum is what Joe's talking about. So if you say right now, which party will win the U.S. House, and you think it's the Republicans currently trading at 20%, you take them now, and if good press comes, that turns into 25% and 30%, then you have the option to cash out.
Prediction Markets Edge, only on SportsGrid.
There is a pick tonight that Gabe has that, to some degree, I find completely outrageous. Then I looked at it a second longer, and it might be a really smart angle.
I like to test them a little bit. I like to test them a little bit.
I like that a lot.
Oh, you don't know? You don't know this team name? You should. You're in the sports business.
Game time decisions, only on SportsGrid.
Number one, who asked for this? Nobody, but nobody asked for a bump up in the number of teams in both the men and the women's basketball tournament from 68, including the 4 play-in teams, to 76. And by the way, it looks like it is a near-done deal. ESPN and ABC News reported this morning that's very close to being done. It could be announced by the end of this week.
NewsWire, only on SportsGrid.
Class is in session. Today, let's talk about the teaser. A teaser is a multi-leg bet where you shift the point spread in your favor. You get better numbers, but every selection has to win. It doesn't matter what you bet if you don't have the insights. Tune into SportsGrid and get ahead of the class.
All right, welcome back to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. It is rivalry weekend in Major League Baseball. We've already seen some of that this week with the Giants playing the Dodgers, but usually this is a fun weekend, one of two over the course of the Major League Baseball season. And really cool idea here when the Yankees play the Mets. In fact, Apple TV is going to show the full Yankees-Mets game tonight on the billboard in Times Square. So that is really cool. And naturally, the Yankees are much better than the Mets are this season, but the Mets have made a little run here. Let's hear from Juan Soto on if the team is headed in the right direction.
You're under contract for a long time. Do you feel encouraged about Benj, Ewing, McLean, those young players in here?
Yeah, I'm really excited for them. That's one of the things we looked up when we signed here to see how great is the farm system and how much talent they have down there. And now get to see it live. It's really cool to see.
All right, we'll see if, I kind of get the feeling the Mets are going to make a little run here. I don't think they're a good team. I think they're not making the postseason, okay? But they cannot be as bad as they've shown. They cannot be as bad as they've shown. I think my prediction this weekend, Mets take 2 out of 3 from the Yankees. How about that? All right, now we will wrap up the show. We'll hear about the World Cup's halftime show and also talk some NFL spreads. It's time now for some last licks. All right, World Cup less than a month away, folks. So get ready. First ever halftime show for the World Cup because, again, it's in the United States. They got some big headliners. Shakira, BTS, and, wow, Madonna going to be headlining the first halftime show at a World Cup on July 19th at MetLife Stadium. That's the championship. The World Cup is meshing Latin, pop, and Korean music. That's the global community. Also, Coldplay's Chris Martin selected this lineup for the halftime show and said it's a chance to show how amazing all different kinds of humans are. Keep in mind, the World Cup has not been in the United States for about 2 decades, if I'm not mistaken here. So really, really good scene, and the championship in July. You thought this summer would be slow. It won't be. Believe me, in a few weeks, when we start to see World Cup matches, everybody, including us here at SportsGrid, will be engaged in that. Well, right after the World Cup is over, then it'll be some time for NFL training camps and some college and pro football. And in case you missed it, last night the schedules came out in the NFL. So naturally, the sports books have the odds too. The biggest spread on the board, by the way, are the Los Angeles Chargers playing at home, 11.5-point favorites against the Arizona Cardinals. But really, the fun games will be the rematches, including the Super Bowl rematch early in the week with the Patriots and Seahawks. Of course, the 49ers will take on the Rams. That's a good one as well. And it all will be capped off with Denver taking on Kansas City. And look at that point spread. Does that tell you that Patrick Mahomes is definitely playing week 1 of the NFL season after his injury? Tells you, oh, you're really not sure. Also, the debut of Fernando Mendoza and the Raiders, they are 3-point favorites against Miami. Unclear if Mendoza will actually play. Maybe Kirk Cousins. They did a good video, by the way, for those of you who saw it yesterday. Step Brothers, if you've ever seen that movie. It was kind of Mendoza and Cousins, but I digress. Okay, it is the run for the roses in the books, and the run for the Triple Crown is officially over because the horse that won is not racing in the Preakness, which is tomorrow. So this is the fascinating part. The 151st running of the Preakness is going to be not at Pimlico, but tomorrow it will be at Laurel Park in Maryland. And the reason why is they are renovating Pimlico. Churchill Downs now has taken over a lot of the rights to Pimlico as well, and that, of course, has something to do with it. The Preakness has been taking place at Pimlico, get this, for 116 consecutive runnings from 1908 to 2025. So this is the first time that Laurel Park will host a Preakness, and it will return to Pimlico Park back in 2027. For those wondering who's in the race, I'm with you. There's a lot of horses that didn't participate in the Derby, including Renegade as well, that are not racing tomorrow. So the favorite currently, maybe there's an opportunity for those of you to make some money on horse racing, Taj Mahal, 5-1 on the morning line, where he is 3-0. So maybe it is Taj Mahal's had good success at Laurel Park, and we'll see tomorrow when the race kicks off at 6:40 Eastern. Then the Belmont will be in June. All right, that'll do it for a week of shows. I thought we had a lot of fun this week. Hopefully you tuned into all of them. If not, tune in next week. We'll be right back. Thanks again to our guest, Carlin Gay from Sporting News, breaking down the National Basketball Association, Sam McQuillan from Legal Sports Report, and, of course, Jacob Kamaker from USA Today. Thanks again to, of course, our directors here on the show, Tommy and Pat all week long. Thanks to our graphics coordinator, Frank, and of course for our producer of this show, Sam. I'm Craig Mish. I hope you have a great weekend, everyone. I'll be back for pro baseball today. What did I miss? What did I miss? Oh, Sam. Oh, why did I say Sam? I was thinking Sam for Sunday. My bad, guys. Chris is still with us. Chris is still with us. Still producing the show. He'll be back on Monday. Maybe I won't be. You never know.
Over the summer where there's drastic changes and gas drops down to $3 a gallon, $2.50 a gallon in some states, and then you have some of the price markets go down. You ride that momentum is what Joe's talking about. So if you say right now, which party will win the U.S. House, and you think it's the Republicans currently trading at 20%, you take them now, and if good press comes, that turns into 25% and 30%, then you have the option to cash out.
Prediction Markets Edge, only on SportsGrid.
There is a pick tonight that Gabe has that, to some degree, I find completely outrageous. Then I looked at it a second longer, and it might be a really smart angle.
I like to test them a little bit. I like to test them a little bit.
I like that a lot.
Oh, yeah, okay. You don't know? You don't know this team name? You should. You're in the sports business.
Game time decisions, only on SportsGrid.
Number one, who asked for this? Nobody, but nobody asked for a bump up in the number of teams in both the men and the women's basketball tournament from 68, including the 4 play-in teams, to 76. And by the way, it looks like it is a near-done deal. ESPN and ABC News reported this morning that's very close to being done. It could be announced by the end of this week.
NewsWire, only on SportsGrid.
Class is in